My boyfriend's sister said she ruled the house and I was only the girlfriend. She lost her mind when we got engaged. Can you imagine building your entire life with someone, only to realize their own family member was systematically trying to tear it all apart? Brick by painful brick? I thought I'd found my soulmate, but his sister was a master manipulator, and she was about to show me just how far she'd go to keep him all to herself. It all started 2 years ago when I met Owen. We connected instantly at a barbecue. Spent 3 hours just talking like we'd known each other forever. He asked me out the very next day, and we've been inseparable ever since. Owen is genuinely one of the kindest, hardest-working men I've ever dated. He owned this beautiful 3-bedroom house, a place he'd busted his butt for years to afford. It was his pride and joy, and honestly a testament to his character. The only complication in our relationship was his sister, Noreen. She'd moved in with Owen 5 years prior, right after her divorce. The plan was a few months until she got back on her feet. 5 years later, she was still there. No rent, no utilities. She'd occasionally buy groceries, but only things she liked, never anything for the household. Owen, being the good brother he is, let her stay because he felt this crushing guilt over her divorce. And at first I got it. Family is important, right? I didn't want to cause any drama. But Noreen? From day one, she made it chillingly clear she saw me as a threat. The first time I stayed over, she watched me like a hawk, like I was casing the place to steal something. She drilled me with questions. How long had I been dating her brother? What did I do for work? How much did I make? Did I have my own place, or was I looking for one? Every single question felt like an interrogation. The next morning, when I left, she told Owen I seemed nice, but something about me felt off. He told me later, thinking it was funny. I didn't laugh, not even a little. Over the next year, her behavior just escalated. She'd rearrange my things after I cleaned. On nights Owen and I had plans, she'd cook these elaborate meals, making him feel guilty about leaving. She'd interrupt us constantly when we were watching movies or just talking. She'd knock on his bedroom door at random hours with questions that absolutely could have waited. She was always there, always a presence, making sure I never forgot she lived there, too. After 18 months, Owen asked me to move in. I was thrilled, until I realized Noreen wasn't going anywhere. Owen said she just needed a little more time. She was almost ready to get her own place. I needed to be patient because she was family. I loved him, and I believed things would work out, so I agreed. The day I brought my first box of belongings to the house, Owen was outside getting more stuff from my car. Noreen pulled me aside. She stood right in front of me in the hallway, leaning in close, speaking so quietly only I could hear. "This is my house," she whispered. "I've been here for 5 years. You're just the girlfriend. Owen might own the property, but I run this household. You can stay in his bedroom, but the rest of the house is my territory. If you try to change anything or push me out, I will make your life miserable." Then she smiled, a cold, knowing smile, and walked away like nothing had happened. I just stood there, holding a box of books, my mind reeling. What the hell had just happened? The next 6 months were exactly what she promised, miserable. She criticized everything. Too much hot water. My cooking smelled. She'd rearrange groceries so I couldn't find anything. She monopolized the living room TV every evening. She told Owen I was messy, even though I was cleaning constantly. She claimed I was rude to her, even though I barely spoke to her. And the crying, oh, the crying. She'd sob to Owen about feeling pushed out of her own home when no one was pushing her anywhere. Owen, bless his heart, always defended me privately, but he never confronted her directly. She was sensitive, still recovering from her divorce. I needed to give her grace. I gave her 6 months of grace. Then I stopped. I started by reclaiming space. Noreen had spread her belongings like she was marking territory. I gathered everything of hers from common areas and put it neatly in her bedroom. When she complained, I calmly told Owen I was just organizing. He thought it was reasonable. She couldn't argue without admitting she'd taken over rooms that weren't hers. Then, I started cooking dinner every night. Noreen used to cook for Owen's attention, but now I got there first. I'd have his favorite meals ready when he got home. Noreen tried competing, but Owen felt bad eating 2 dinners. So she ate alone while we ate together. Next, I took over household management. I made a chore schedule and posted it on the fridge. Noreen was on it. After all, she lived there rent-free. She could contribute. She threw a fit, screaming I had no right. I told Owen it was only fair since I was contributing more than her, having moved in 5 years later. He agreed. He actually told Noreen she needed to help. It was the first time he'd ever set a boundary with her. Noreen started slipping. She couldn't handle rules. She skipped chores, and I calmly pointed it out. She made passive-aggressive comments, and I responded with aggressive politeness. She tried to get Owen alone to complain, but I made sure we spent most of our time together. I wasn't fighting with her. I was simply taking up the space she assumed was hers forever. The breaking point came when Owen mentioned us getting engaged. I heard Noreen's footsteps freeze in the hallway. We'd been sitting on the bed, talking about timelines, what kind of ring I might like. Owen was so relaxed, so happy. Then, Noreen pushed the door open without knocking. Her face drained of all color, then instantly flooded crimson. She stood there, breathing hard, staring at us. Owen started to say something, but she cut him off, storming into the living room. We followed because the alternative was letting her destroy something. She spun around, pointed a finger at me. "Getting engaged would be the biggest mistake of your life," she shrieked at Owen. "She's just using you for your house." Owen tried to calm her, but she was screaming. "She's already pushed me out of my own home. Now, she's trying to steal you, completely." Owen kept saying her name, a quiet, desperate sound, like he was trying to soothe a wild animal. Noreen ignored him, yelling about how I'd ruined everything, turned him against his family. I stood there silently, knowing anything I said would make it worse. Finally, she ran out of steam and locked herself in her bedroom. Owen looked at me, utterly helpless. I told him we'd talk tomorrow, and went to bed. The next 3 days were pure psychological warfare, worse than anything she'd done before. Music blasted from her room at 2 a.m., bass shaking the walls. I'd just fall asleep, and then some terrible pop song would jolt me awake. Owen asked her to turn it down. She said she couldn't sleep. The second night, I got up at 6 for work, and there was no hot water. Ice cold. When I came out, Noreen was in the kitchen, making coffee, acting innocent. "Sleep well," she chirped. I just said, "Fine," and left for work, skipping breakfast. That afternoon, Owen called me. Noreen told him I'd been saying cruel things about his family. He knew it wasn't true, but he had to check. I asked what specifically I'd said. He got quiet. Noreen wouldn't give details. She just cried. That's when I started keeping notes on my phone. Times the music started. Hot water incidents. Noreen's complaints. I didn't know why I was documenting, but a gut feeling told me I'd need proof. 2 weeks later, Owen took me to our favorite Italian place. We'd had our 3rd date there. He seemed so nervous, barely touched his pasta. When the waiter cleared our plates, Owen reached across, took my hand. He told me he loved me, wanted to spend his life with me. Then, he pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was his grandmother's ring. I said yes before he even finished asking. I wasn't going to let Noreen's manipulation control our future. We were so happy, so excited, talking about telling people wedding timelines. But a tight knot formed in my stomach, a cold dread about what came next. We drove home, holding hands, making plans. As we pulled into the driveway, I saw her, Noreen, standing at the living room window watching us. The curtain pulled back, her arms crossed. Owen saw her too, his smile faded. I squeezed his hand. "It'll be okay." I didn't believe it for a second. Owen wanted to tell her immediately. It's not fair to keep it from her. I suggested waiting till morning, but he insisted. He asked her to sit down in the living room. I sat next to Owen. Noreen took the armchair opposite us. Owen told her. For a second, she just stared. Then she started crying. Not quiet tears, but huge, gasping sobs like she couldn't breathe. You're abandoning me, she wailed. Just like my ex-husband did. She's turned you against your own family. I have nowhere to go. I can't afford to live alone. Owen looked absolutely devastated. He moved to her, put his arm around her. Nothing has to change immediately, he reassured her. You can stay as long as you need. My stomach dropped. I felt completely alone, watching him comfort her, promising things would work out. After an hour, Noreen finally went to her room. Owen looked exhausted. I told him I was going to bed and left him sitting there in the dark. I waited until I heard Noreen's door lock, then went back to the living room. Owen was still there, staring into space. I sat down. We need to talk. Seriously. He nodded but wouldn't look at me. I explained as calmly as I could that I wasn't moving forward with wedding planning while his sister lived rent-free and treated me like an intruder. This is supposed to be our home, Owen, I said, and I don't feel welcome in it. He got defensive. Noreen was going through a hard time. I needed to be more understanding. I asked him, how long am I supposed to wait, Owen? He had no answer. You've been avoiding this confrontation for years, and it's finally caught up to you. I saw the recognition in his eyes. He knew I was right, even though he didn't want to admit it. He asked what I wanted him to do. You need to set a timeline for Noreen to move out, and you need to actually stick to it this time. He said he'd think about it. Thinking isn't enough anymore, I said and went to bed. The following week, we started looking at wedding venues online. I'd bookmarked a few places, and Owen seemed excited about a barn venue. We scheduled a video tour for Saturday morning. Friday night, Noreen announced she was having the bathroom tiles replaced starting at 8 a.m. Saturday. Owen asked if she could reschedule. The contractor's only available this weekend. I've been planning it for weeks. I knew she was lying, but I stayed silent. Saturday morning, we did the video call in Owen's car in the driveway because the hammering inside was deafening. The coordinator kept asking if everything was okay. After that, Noreen inserted herself into every decision. Every venue was too expensive. Spring weddings were cursed because her marriage fell apart in April. She scheduled loud projects during every single video tour. Photographers were overpriced. Catering discussions? Nobody will come if you don't serve my mother's recipes. I stopped arguing. I just wrote everything down. A detailed log. Dates, times, exact words, actions. Owen needed to see the pattern in writing because he couldn't see it in real time. 3 weeks into our engagement, my best friend, Becca, came over for coffee. Noreen was out. Becca mentioned running into Noreen at the grocery store. She was driving a new car, Becca said, something silver and expensive looking. My stomach lurched. When was this? I asked. 2 days ago. Noreen had told Owen she couldn't afford a car, constantly borrowing his. After Becca left, I started digging. Social media. I found posts from Noreen's coworkers, tagging her at a downtown office building. I looked up the company. They were hiring for her exact position with a salary range that made my stomach churn. She was making more than Owen. I tracked her spending based on things I'd seen her buy and realized she had to have significant savings. She'd been perfectly capable of affording her own place for at least 2 years. Playing helpless, building a nest egg. When Owen got home, I showed him everything. The job listings, the social media posts, my notes on her spending. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. He looked sick. I've been working overtime for months to cover household expenses, he whispered. She'd been playing the victim while building a savings account and driving a car nicer than his. The betrayal was crushing. Saturday morning, I woke up to voices. Owen's parents were there along with Noreen. Tabitha and Nolan both looked at me with these tight, disappointed expressions. Noreen, of course, had been crying. Tabitha started talking about family bonds and being more understanding. Noreen was going through a difficult time. I needed to show more compassion. Nolan chimed in, saying Owen had responsibilities to his sister that came before our relationship. They talked for about 5 minutes while I stood there in my pajamas. Then I held up one finger. "Excuse me." I went to get my folder. I had printed everything. Organized. Tabs. I came back and calmly presented my documentation. The log of sabotage attempts with dates and times. The evidence of her actual financial situation, including screenshots of her salary range and her expensive car. The timeline of escalating behavior from the day I moved in. Tabitha's expression shifted as she read through the pages. Nolan got quiet, no longer looking at Noreen. I didn't say anything. I just let the evidence speak for itself. When they finished, Tabitha looked at Noreen. "Is this true?" Noreen started crying again, but this time it was different. More desperate. "She's twisting everything. Making me look bad." Nolan asked about the job and the car. "That's private. None of your business." Noreen snapped. Tabitha gathered the papers. "Owen, we need to talk. As a family." I went back to the bedroom, leaving them to it. That night, Owen's best friend, Leonardo, came over for a guys' night. I went to Becca's to give them space. When I came home around 11, they were still at the kitchen table, surrounded by empty beer bottles. Leonardo saw me and started to leave, but Owen asked him to stay. Leonardo looked uncomfortable but sat back down. He then told Owen something everyone in their friend group had known for years, but never dared to say. He described how Noreen had destroyed Owen's previous 2 serious relationships, using the exact same pattern. Manufacturing crises, playing the victim, making Owen choose, sabotaging plans. He'd watched it happen twice before I came along, he said, and hoped Owen would see it this time. But Noreen's manipulation had gotten more sophisticated. Everyone was afraid to speak up, to cause family drama, but watching it happen again with me was just too much. Owen sat completely still, listening to his best friend explain that his sister had been controlling his personal life for years. Leonardo left, and Owen didn't say a word for a long time. Then he just said, "Thank you for telling me the truth." The next morning, I laid everything out for Owen. My documentation spread across the kitchen table, next to the financial evidence, next to Leonardo's account. I walked him through the pattern of Noreen deliberately sabotaging his relationships. How she'd been capable of independence for years, but chose to stay and maintain control. Each piece of evidence, each cruel word, each calculated action. Owen looked physically ill. His hands shook, his face pale. He kept picking up different pages, reading them like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Then something shifted. The guilt and confusion melted away, replaced by anger. Real anger. Not the frustrated helplessness I'd seen before, but a deep, righteous fury. "I need to set a firm deadline," he said, his voice quiet but shaking. "And I need to actually enforce it this time, instead of letting her manipulate me into backing down." I asked if he was sure. "I've never been more sure of anything," he declared. "I've wasted years enabling behavior that hurt both of us. It's time to stop." Owen called Noreen into the living room that evening. I stood next to him. I wanted her to see we were united. She came in looking annoyed, like we were interrupting her TV show. She sat down, arms crossed. Owen took a deep breath. "Noreen, you have 60 days to find an apartment and move out." He offered to help with first month's rent and the security deposit, but added, "This arrangement isn't working anymore. It needs to end." Noreen's face cycled through annoyed, shocked, then pure rage in 3 seconds flat. She stood up. "Is she behind this? Is she poisoning you against your own family?" Owen held firm. "This is my decision, and I've been thinking about it for a while." She immediately switched tactics. Tears. Sobbing. I can't believe my own brother is abandoning me, just like my ex-husband. I have nowhere to go. I can't afford to live alone. Owen, in a steady voice, reminded her about her full-time job and the savings account I had discovered. Her tears stopped instantly. The color drained from her face again. She got cold then, really cold. You're choosing some woman you barely know over your own sister, who's been there for you your whole life, she hissed. She'll leave you eventually, and then you'll regret pushing away the one person who actually loves you. Owen's hands were shaking, but he held his ground. The deadline is 60 days. It's final. Noreen looked at me with pure, undiluted hatred. This isn't over, she spat. Then she walked out and slammed her bedroom door hard enough to rattle the pictures on the wall. Owen sat down heavily on the couch, burying his face in his hands. I sat next to him, placing a hand on his back. I'm proud of you, I told him, even though I knew how incredibly hard that was. He looked up, tears in his eyes. I hope I'm doing the right thing. You absolutely are, I said, and we'll get through this together. The next few weeks were tense, but Noreen seemed to accept the deadline. She started looking at apartments online, even went to see a few. Owen started to relax a little, thinking maybe she understood. I, however, stayed cautious. I knew Noreen better than that. She was planning something. I just didn't know it yet. Then, with exactly 1 week left before the 60-day deadline, Noreen developed mysterious stomach pains. She came out of her room one morning, doubled over, groaning. Owen immediately wanted to rush her to the emergency room. I watched her carefully. She was peeking at Owen's reaction through her fingers as she groaned. They spent 4 hours at the hospital. Tests. Nothing. Absolutely nothing wrong. Noreen came home with pain medication and a referral to a specialist. I can't possibly focus on apartment hunting now, Owen, she said. This health crisis. I need to concentrate on getting better first. Owen looked torn. I could see him wavering. That night, after Noreen went to bed, Owen suggested maybe we should give her more time. She was sick. No, I said, looking him straight in the eye. This is manipulation, pure and simple. I pointed out how convenient it was that this mysterious illness showed up exactly 1 week before she had to leave. I reminded him the doctors found nothing, and how she'd peeked at him. Owen wanted to believe me, but the guilt was eating at him. What if she was sick? What kind of brother would he be? We are not resetting the deadline for a medical emergency that only appears when deadlines approach, I stated firmly. Noreen went to the emergency room 3 more times that week. Each visit lasted hours. Each time, absolutely nothing wrong. She came home with different pain meds, more referrals, but no diagnosis. She spent most of her time in her room, groaning loudly enough for us to hear. Owen was exhausted from worry. I was exhausted from watching this obvious manipulation, while Owen wrestled with his guilt. The deadline came and went. Noreen was still in the house, claiming she was too sick to move. Owen hadn't enforced the deadline. I saw the pattern beginning all over again. Crisis. Manufactured. Owen backs down. Nothing changes. I couldn't do this anymore. I packed a bag one morning while Owen was at work and left it in my car. When he got home that evening, I told him, I'm moving out temporarily. I'm staying with Becca until Noreen is actually gone. Owen's face went pale. What do you mean? He asked, panicked. I explained as calmly as I could. I love you, Owen, but I won't participate in this cycle anymore. Boundaries are set, and they dissolve the moment Noreen manufactures a crisis. I watched you back down from the deadline you set. I understand why, but I can't stay and watch it happen again and again. He started crying, begging me not to go. I'm not breaking up with you, I said, but I need you to prove, through action, that you're ready to prioritize us. When Noreen is actually out of this house and staying out, I will come back. Until then, I'm with Becca. I hugged him tight. This is the only way you'll actually follow through. Then I picked up my bag and left. I cried the whole drive to Becca's apartment. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but I knew, deep down, it was necessary. Becca opened her door and hugged me without a word. She'd been expecting my call for weeks. 2 days later, Owen showed up at Becca's. He looked terrible. Red, puffy eyes, wrinkled clothes, exhausted, heartbroken, and determined, all at once. I went through with it, he choked out. I told her she had 1 week to be out, or I would start formal eviction proceedings. He said it was the hardest thing he'd ever done, but he finally understood. Enabling Noreen had hurt both of them, prevented her from building her own independent life. I asked if he was sure. He nodded, his chin trembling. Losing you, it made me realize I'd been choosing my sister's comfort over our future for too long. I'm done making that choice. I hugged him tight, feeling him shake. I know this is incredibly hard, I whispered, but we'll get through the aftermath together. He clung to me like I might disappear if he let go. We stood in Becca's doorway, holding each other as he cried. Becca gave us space, retreating to her room. Owen told me everything that had happened after I left. How Noreen's mysterious stomach pains vanished the moment he told her the deadline was final. How she screamed at him for hours, calling him a terrible brother. How she called their parents, claiming he was forcing her onto the streets while she was sick. And how he stood firm anyway, because he couldn't lose me. I'm so proud of you, I told him. This is the right thing, even though it feels awful. Noreen's final week in the house was a nightmare. She stopped pretending to be civil and went straight to destruction. I came back to help Owen, and immediately regretted it. The first thing I noticed was the smell of bleach from the laundry room. I opened the washing machine to find all my clothes soaking in pure bleach. Every single piece ruined. White spots, holes where the bleach had eaten through the fabric. Months of my wardrobe, destroyed in one spiteful act. Owen looked sick. Then we found the scratches. Deep gouges carved into the hardwood floor of the master bedroom, like someone had taken a key or a knife and dragged it across the wood, over and over. The scratches formed words. Traitor! Carved 2 feet tall into his floor. Owen just stood there, staring at the damage to his house, the house he'd worked overtime for years to afford. The destruction went beyond my clothes and the floor. She'd smashed several dishes that belonged to Owen's grandmother. Family pieces, passed down for generations. She left them broken on the kitchen counter. She poured something sticky down the bathroom drain, clogging it completely. Holes in her bedroom walls. The lock on the back door broken. Every day brought new damage, new evidence of how much she hated us. Owen documented everything. Photos of each destroyed item, every damaged surface. I watched him photograph his grandmother's broken dishes, and I saw something change in his face. For the first time, he looked genuinely angry at his sister, rather than just disappointed or guilty. She's crossed a line, he said, his voice tight. From manipulation to actual malicious destruction. This isn't grief or fear anymore. This is deliberate cruelty, meant to hurt us as much as possible. The week ended and Noreen refused to leave, locked herself in her room. I'm not going anywhere. Owen stood outside her door. You have 1 hour to start packing, or I'm calling the police. She screamed that he wouldn't dare. He pulled out his phone, started dialing. She opened the door then, looking at him like she didn't recognize him. The deadline has passed, he told her. You are trespassing in my house now. Fine, she spat and went back in, but she still didn't pack. The next morning, Owen went to the county courthouse and filed formal eviction paperwork. The clerk explained the process would take at least another 30 days and cost hundreds in legal fees. Owen signed everything, paid the fees without hesitation. I should have done this months ago, he said, instead of hoping she'd leave voluntarily. The clerk gave him a court date and instructions for serving Noreen with the notice. Owen drove home and handed Noreen the papers himself. She read them, and then she laughed. You're really going to drag your own sister to court over this? She sneered. Yes, he said. I am. Their parents will be ashamed of him, she told him. They already know everything, Owen replied, his voice calm, and they support my decision. That made her stop laughing. What do you mean? She asked, her voice faltering. Mom and Dad know about the destroyed property, the manipulation, and your refusal to leave. She went pale and locked herself back in her room. Over the next few days, Noreen called everyone. Friends, distant relatives. She posted vague messages on social media about betrayal and family bonds, carefully omitting every detail about her behavior, her finances, the destruction. Some people believed her, sending Owen angry messages. Others, to my surprise, asked for his side of the story and stopped talking to Noreen when they heard the truth. The family drama spread wider than our house, and I felt guilty about that, even though none of it was my fault. My phone rang one afternoon. Tabitha, Owen's mom. My stomach dropped. I assumed she was calling to yell at me for breaking up her family. I answered, and she asked if we could meet for lunch, without Owen or Noreen. I agreed cautiously. We met at a quiet restaurant. Tabitha looked older, tired, sad. She ordered coffee, then she apologized. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice heavy, for initially taking Noreen's side, for not understanding what was really happening. She explained that she and Nolan had been enabling Noreen's dependence since her divorce, feeling guilty about her failed marriage. They thought they were helping her heal, but instead, they'd prevented her from moving forward. Watching Owen finally set boundaries, she said, made us realize we needed to stop rescuing Noreen from the natural consequences of her choices. I didn't know what to say. I expected anger, not an apology and self-awareness. Tabitha said she'd talked to Owen, seen the photos of the destruction, and understood why the eviction was necessary. She and Nolan would help Noreen with moving costs, but they supported Owen completely. I hope you can forgive us, she finished, for not seeing the situation clearly earlier. There's nothing to forgive, I told her genuinely. I'm just glad you understand now. We talked for over an hour about family dynamics, enabling, and how hard it is to see manipulation when it comes from someone you love. Tabitha hugged me before we left. Thank you for not giving up on Owen, she said. He needed someone strong enough to help him break the cycle. Nolan went to see Noreen a few days later. Owen told me about it afterward because Noreen called him, screaming, right after their dad left. Nolan sat down with Noreen and told her that he and Tabitha would help with moving costs, but they supported Owen's decision completely. He said they'd watched her manipulate Owen for years, and they were ashamed they hadn't intervened sooner to encourage her independence. Enabling her had seemed kind, he said, but it had actually been cruel because it prevented her from building her own life. Noreen apparently told him he was choosing Owen over her, just like everyone else. Nolan said he was choosing what was healthy for both his children, even if Noreen couldn't see that yet. He loved her, but he wouldn't help her avoid the consequences of her choices anymore. Noreen told him to get out, but Owen said something shifted in her expression when she realized her parents weren't taking her side this time. Her usual support system had collapsed. She was finally alone with the results of her own behavior. The moving truck arrived on a Tuesday morning, exactly 93 days after Owen first told Noreen she needed to leave. 3 long months of manipulation, destruction, legal proceedings, and agonizing family conflict, all leading to this moment. Professional movers loaded Noreen's belongings into the truck while she supervised, carefully avoiding eye contact with either of us. She'd found a 1-bedroom apartment across town, paid for partially by her parents and partially by her own savings, which she'd finally admitted existed. The movers worked efficiently, and within 3 hours, everything she owned was packed and loaded. Noreen got in her car without saying goodbye. She pulled out of the driveway, and the moving truck followed. Owen and I stood there, watching both vehicles disappear down the street. The house was finally ours. Just ours. No more Noreen watching our every move. No more manipulation, or sabotage, or constant tension. Owen started crying. Not sad crying or happy crying, but this complicated mix of relief and grief and guilt, all happening at once. He'd reclaimed his home, but he'd lost his relationship with his sister in the process. He'd done the right thing, but it still hurt. I held him in the driveway while he processed everything. His whole body shook, and he cried harder than I'd ever seen him cry before. I didn't say anything, just held him, letting him feel whatever he needed to feel. Eventually, he stopped shaking and pulled back. He looked at the house like he was seeing it for the first time. "It feels different already," he said, his voice hoarse. "Lighter, somehow." "That's what freedom feels like," I replied. The next 2 weeks were hard for Owen in ways I hadn't expected. He kept second-guessing himself, wondering if he'd been too harsh. He'd check his phone constantly, hoping Noreen had texted. He'd suggest we drive by her apartment just to make sure she was okay. He'd wake up in the middle of the night, convinced she was struggling, needing help. The guilt came in waves, sometimes pulling him under completely. I reminded him gently each time, setting boundaries isn't cruelty. Noreen was a capable adult who needed to build her own life, not live in his shadow. She'd been perfectly capable of independence for years, but chose dependence because it was easier and gave her control. Letting her face the natural results of her choices was the kindest thing he could do for her long-term growth. Owen listened, but I could see him struggling to believe it. One particularly bad night, he suggested maybe we should invite her over for dinner, start rebuilding their relationship. I asked him if he thought she was ready for that, or if he was just trying to ease his own guilt. He admitted it was probably the guilt. I suggested we start couples counseling to work through the family dynamics, to strengthen our communication. Owen agreed immediately, like he'd been waiting for me to suggest it. We found a therapist who specialized in family systems and boundary setting. Our first session helped more than I expected. Just having a neutral third party validate that Owen's boundaries were healthy and necessary seemed to lift some of the weight off his shoulders. The first project we tackled was the master bedroom. Noreen had chosen the paint color years ago, a dull beige that made everything feel dark and cramped. Owen and I spent a Saturday afternoon at the hardware store picking out samples. We settled on a soft gray blue that made the room feel bigger and brighter. I painted while Owen pulled up the damaged flooring she'd scratched. We replaced it with new hardwood that matched the rest of the house. We moved the bed to a different wall, brought in a dresser from my old apartment. Owen hung photos of us on vacation and with friends. By the end of the month, walking into that bedroom felt completely different. The space held no trace of Noreen's anger or the tension that used to fill every corner. Owen started sleeping better. He stopped waking up, checking his phone. I caught him smiling while folding laundry one afternoon. "What are you thinking about?" I asked. "Just happy to be home," he said, really home, for the first time in years. We tackled the living room next. Noreen had arranged all the furniture to face the television she'd monopolized. We moved the couch to create a better conversation area, added a reading chair by the window. I brought in plants, and Owen built shelves for our books. We replaced her heavy, dark curtains with lighter ones that let in more sun. The house started feeling like it belonged to both of us, instead of being Noreen's territory that Owen happened to own. We cooked together in the kitchen without someone hovering and criticizing. We watched movies on the couch without interruptions. We had friends over for dinner without worrying about Noreen making everything awkward. The house felt lighter, calmer, like we could finally breathe properly. 2 months after Noreen moved out, Owen's phone buzzed during breakfast. He read the message, and his face went carefully neutral. He handed me the phone. Noreen was asking if he wanted to meet for coffee. The text was different from her usual demands. She asked instead of telling. She suggested a coffee shop near her apartment, instead of expecting him to come to her. She said she understood if he wasn't ready, but she hoped they could talk. Owen looked at me. "What do you think?" "It's your decision," I said, "but I wouldn't be upset if you wanted to see her." He texted back, suggesting Thursday afternoon. Owen met Noreen at a small coffee shop across town. I stayed home, trying not to check the clock every 5 minutes. He was gone for almost 2 hours. When he came back, he looked tired but not upset. He sat down at the kitchen table and told me what happened. Noreen apologized, truly apologized. No excuses, no blaming anyone else. She said losing control of his house had forced her to look at herself honestly for the first time since her divorce. She'd been using him as a crutch, manipulating him to avoid facing her own life. She'd started seeing a therapist who helped her understand how dependent she'd become. She admitted she'd been horrible to me and to him. She didn't expect forgiveness, she said, but wanted him to know she was working on herself. Owen told her he appreciated the apology, but needed time before they could rebuild any kind of relationship. He made it clear he wouldn't go back to their old dynamic. Noreen said she understood. They agreed to have coffee again in a month if Owen felt ready. Wedding planning became easier without Noreen sabotaging everything. We looked at venues without someone criticizing every option. We chose a date in early October when the weather would be perfect. We booked a small garden venue for about 80 people. Owen's parents were incredibly supportive and helpful. Tabitha took me shopping for my dress, and we actually had fun. She told me stories about Owen as a kid that made me love him even more. She apologized again for not seeing Noreen's behavior sooner, admitting she and Nolan had enabled both their children in different ways, and they were trying to do better. We invited Noreen to the wedding. Owen wanted to extend the invitation as a gesture of moving forward, and I agreed, seeing how much it mattered to him. Noreen accepted with a text that sounded genuinely happy for us. She didn't ask to be involved in planning or try to insert herself into decisions. We set clear boundaries. She could attend as a guest, but we weren't asking for her input or help. Tabitha became my main helper with wedding preparations. She had great taste and respected my opinions. She and I grew closer over the months of planning. I started to feel like I had a real relationship with Owen's mother, separate from all the drama with Noreen. Our wedding day arrived on a perfect October afternoon. The garden venue looked beautiful with fall flowers and warm sunshine. Noreen showed up on time, wearing an appropriate dress. She congratulated us and didn't create any scenes, but I could still feel the tension underneath everything. She stood apart from the family during photos. She left the reception early without saying goodbye to everyone. Owen's parents looked sad, even while celebrating with us. I knew they were mourning the family harmony that might never fully return. But I was genuinely happy walking down the aisle toward Owen. I meant every word of my vows. I also knew our family dynamics would never be simple or easy. Noreen would always be Owen's sister. There would always be some level of complicated history and careful boundary management. We'd fought for our relationship, and we'd won, but the victory was messy and painful. Standing at the altar, holding Owen's hands, I felt satisfied knowing we'd made it through the hard parts together. We were stronger for everything we'd survived. Our relationship wasn't a fairy tale with a perfect ending. It was real. Have you ever had to fight for your relationship against a difficult family member? Or been caught in a situation where loyalty was constantly tested? Tell me your story in the comments below. I'd really love to hear it.